and welcome to my birth story. While I was pregnant with our beautiful little boy Hunter, I used to watch heaps of different videos on YouTube about what you need for babies, birth stories, what to expect, this and this. I was overly prepared for everything. I went into everything with a really positive mindset, whether I had to have a cesarean, whether I had to give birth naturally, whether I had to do this, everything. I was just excited for the whole experience. I obviously went in there thinking that I wanted to do everything naturally, so it took a little bit of a turn, which is why I'm sharing my birth story, just because it wasn't the normal, and I feel like not many people talk about it when it's an emergency C-section, because it is something that's really stressful and it does take a massive toll out on you and your partner, and even your baby. So it's something that not many people talk about because of that. So I'm more than happy to talk about it. I'm quite okay with it all now, but yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Throughout my whole pregnancy, I wrote everything in this little book here, so things like my weight, how it changed over the time, my pains, any symptoms or anything that I had, my emotions, just so that in future, if I ever want to look back at it, especially if I have more kids, I can compare my pregnancies, see how different they are, and it's just something that I've really wanted to keep track of. Throughout my whole pregnancy, I was very positive. I was very lucky to have a good pregnancy. I wasn't really sick or anything like that, so I count my lucky stars on that one. So throughout my whole pregnancy, we were told that our baby was quite big, in the 90th percentile, which is a lot bigger than the average baby, which didn't bother me at all. I was happy to just keep going on with things, and there was no problems. He was really happy and healthy. He was 8 days overdue. Previously to that, I'd been given one stretch and sweep, and then on the Friday I went in and had another stretch and sweep and got monitored just to make sure that everything was okay. That was all good. I went home, and then that night, so on the 29th, I started having contraction-like pains. Started at about 8:30 at night. They weren't constant or anything, but I just kept an eye on it, and I said to Luke, we should go to sleep early just in case this is it, so that we're both nice and rested. Luckily for Luke, he got a full night's sleep. So I'd been up all night having contractions every 5 to 10 minutes. At about 3 o'clock, I called the hospital. They said to stay at home as long as I could until it was about 2 to 5 minutes apart, which was all fine. At that point, I was okay, and they said if the pain gets too bad, then you can come in. But yeah, like I said, I was okay. It wasn't till about 5 o'clock in the morning I actually woke up Luke. At this point, he had no idea I was in labor or contracting or anything, because I just let him sleep, because I knew that if it was going to be a long labor, I would need him by my side with energy. At that point, he told me to call the hospital again, so I called the hospital. They were told me to wait at home as long as I can again, unless the pain got really bad. So same thing, they were getting a little bit shorter, but they were still around the 3 to 6 minute mark, so there was nothing too constant in that. I was exhausted though. I'd been up all night. Got to about 9 o'clock in the morning, the pain just got so bad that I decided that I wanted to go into the hospital, because Panadol just wasn't really doing anything for me. We got to the hospital, they set us up on monitors and everything, and then spoke about sending us home if everything was okay after a few hours. Kept waiting. Contractions got worse and worse, the pain got worse and worse, but the time still was about the same. There wasn't really much movement in that. At about midday, they decided that I was in too much pain, so they took me up to the birthing suite. I should also mention that I was actually booked in to get induced the next day. So Saturday night, I was booked in to go in and have the hormone, which ripens my cervix, and then induce the next morning. So my body naturally went into it before then, thankfully. But yeah, they had that in mind that I was going to be induced, so they took me up to the birthing suite and we went from there. And then they put me on a light gas, which helped a little bit for the time being. A couple of hours passed. They were still possibly talking about sending me home because I was still the only one centimetre dilated. But once again, I was in a lot of pain. They kept us in. Hours passed and the gas wasn't really doing anything, so we upped the gas even more, which helped for about another couple of hours. After that, we decided to get the morphine, and it was pretty much from then on that everything went crazy. So by crazy, I mean they gave me the drug to ripen my cervix as well as the morphine at the same time, to hope that it would help me dilate quicker, because I was still only 1 centimeter dilated. Not long after that, they broke my waters, which was more painful than I expected. And then our baby's heart rate started to drop during my contractions. So that wasn't too scary, because after I finished my contraction, it would come back up. So we just kept a close eye on that, and that was one of the main reasons they kept me in as well. And that's why they wanted to speed up the process by breaking my waters. And then because of this, they wanted to put a clip on the baby's head so that it would track his heart rate a little bit more accurately than the monitors that they put on your stomach. The first doctor tried that. They couldn't get it on because I was only 1 centimeter dilated, so that was really painful. And then another doctor came in and then they did it, and then from then on, I honestly don't remember that much of it because it was such a big blur. But that happened, and then the next time, pretty much straight after that, the baby's heart rate dropped in my next contraction, and it didn't come back up. So every other contraction it had like raised back after the contraction, but this time it didn't, so it was lower than it had been for all the other ones as well. At that point they told me that they wanted to do a C-section on me, which I was completely okay with. I had been in labor, well, having contractions for 22 hours at this point, so I was absolutely exhausted, and the thought of a C-section honestly was kind of a relief, even though it was a path that I wasn't really wanting to take. But hey, I was so relieved when they said it. Little did I realize how serious the situation was, and that it was an emergency cesarean. So I was rushed into theatre. I went from having 1 doctor or midwife in the room to about 20 at once. It was so stressful. I was getting run down the hallway into the surgery room. I was in so much pain at that point. I was still contracting. Luke got run off to go in to get changed into scrubs, so I was no longer with him. I was by myself with the doctors. I got to surgery, they were rushing around frantically because the baby's heart rate was still really low and it hadn't come back up. Once we got in there to the surgery room and was sorted, his heart rate came back up. So then they weren't rushing too much. They were going to do a C-section where they had to completely knock me out, which would mean that Luke wouldn't be in the room with me. But because his heart rate came back up, they were able to just give me the spinal and then proceed with a normal emergency cesarean, which was okay. That was all kind of a blur. It all happened so quickly because it was an emergency, because everything was going on. I had someone grabbing at my arm, someone grabbing at my other arm, my legs and everything. I just completely just zonked out. They gave me something to stop my contractions as well before they gave me the spinal, so at that point the pain was gone. I was just kind of in shock, I think, because everything just happened so quickly. Where am I? At that point they'd already cut me open. I couldn't find Luke anywhere in the room, so he wasn't by my side. I asked someone where he was and they ran out and grabbed him. Someone had taken him to the waiting room, and yeah, it was just a bit all over the shop. But in the end he made it there just before they pulled him out. They took him, they showed us quickly, and then they took him straight over to the desk. Apparently his shoulders and arms got a little bit stuck, so they had to really pull him out and they had to just double check over everything. Once that was settled, Luke got to go over, give him a cuddle and then bring him over to me. Turns out, so what had happened was my body wasn't dilating past 1 centimeter. I forgot to mention that earlier. When they tried to put the clip on his head, they also told me I hadn't dilated any further than 1 centimeter. So that was a massive heartbreak for me. But then, yeah, I got over it because we went into emergency C-section, so that's fine. But his heart rate wouldn't raise, my body wouldn't dilate, so everything was just rushed and everything in that way. But in the end, we got a healthy, happy little baby. I got to cuddle him and feed him pretty much straight after in recovery, which was really nice. And then the nurses and everything in the hospital were amazing. Recovery has been obviously not what I expected because I didn't plan to have a cesarean, but yeah, it's going as good as it can be, and I'm slowly getting there, and I'm just so over the moon and happy about everything. Even though it didn't go as planned, I'm still really in a good place about how everything went. I think because I was in shock, I didn't really get stressed out about it. Luke, on the other hand, when he came into the room, into the surgery room, he was quite shocked. Obviously he experienced me being in all that pain, standing there helplessly, were his words, trying to do whatever he can to help me, but and then when that happened, he kind of stressed out, especially when he was separated from me, and he was worried that he'd miss it all as well, which would obviously be really scary from a partner's point of view. Once we got back into the room after everything had settled down, we sat down and I could just tell that he was still in shock. He just wasn't himself. I think we both were really, it had happened. We were both exhausted because it had been such a long day. But yeah, it took Luke a little bit to get over it in that way, because he was just, I suppose it's just something that we didn't plan for or even expect or talk about, because it's just not something that you think will happen. But yeah, we've both recovered from it now. He's probably a little bit more scarred from it in that way than I am, because I've just, you know, got through it, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's about it.